Hello everyone, welcome to Storytelling Beyond Words. We just listened to that amazing keynote all about ambition, and in game development there is not much that's more ambitious than trying to build your own world entirely from scratch. So on this panel we are absolutely so lucky to have three amazing people who have created fantastic games that I love, all of them: Wayward Strand, Unpacking, and Ring of Pain.
There's 4 amazing people here.
Yeah. Hello. Also,
Broken Rose is coming.
Broken Rose is coming. It's not out yet, but we are also creating our own world. So I'm so delighted that you are all able to join me to discuss one of my absolute favorite topics, which is making sure that you have a coherent, consistent, believable, entertaining, interesting, and deep world. So let us introduce ourselves. Goldie, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Goldie. I'm formerly the art director for Ghost Pattern, who've just released Wayward Strand. But the way this... Yeah. But the way our studio works is it's a very relaxed place to work, and we've been working on this game for a very long time, and during that time we've all contributed towards the world building, the shape and personality of our characters, and so yeah, as well as designing the visual look for the game, I've contributed as well to how the world works. Not sure what else it says up there. My username is GhostTownGoldie on Twitter, and I'll be talking about how the game works during this talk, no doubt.
My name is Wren Brier. You may have just heard me in the other hall. Hi. I made a game called Unpacking with my partner Tim and our lovely team. My title on that is officially creative director, but considering how tiny the studio is, that means like very little. It's like I just do a lot of different things, and that also included working on the narrative collaboratively with Tim, and also like another person we hired, Annie, who is not here because she is based in the US. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to talking all about narrative with you guys.
Hello, I'm Simon Boxer. I also, like Wren, just put creative director because it seemed like it encompasses what I do in an indie studio. Yeah, I do the writing, art and design on a game called Ring of Pain. I was previously a concept artist for I've been in the industry for about 15 years, mostly doing art, and now kind of more of a generalist. So yeah, that's
Ring of Pain, everyone.
And I'm Leanne Taylor-Giles. I'm the narrative director at Bytes, working on Broken Roads. Just returned from 10 years overseas, so excuse my accent. I'm happy to be back in my home country and very delighted to speak to all of you.
Can I just say Leanne taught me narrative in university, so Leanne, take credit. Take credit for some of the narrative and Unpacking, all right?
I'm very, very proud of you. I'm so delighted when I saw your success. I was just going, yes, this is amazing. So I'm very happy you're here. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the smallest piece of video game storytelling, which is the inventory item. So personally, my favorite inventory item is the golden pantaloons from Baldur's Gate 1. You get by talking to a noble who tells you to go and wash them, and you can't. So you just have this junk item in your inventory. If you keep it through Baldur's Gate 2 and Throne of Baal, you can actually combine the golden pantaloons, the silver pantaloons, and the bronze pantaloons into a mech suit and fire rockets. So I love how much this creates a mystery for the player. And we're going to talk a little bit each about our favorite items and our favorite games. So Goldie, would you like to go?
Sure. I've got a few. The first one that sprung to mind was any kind of key. Obviously, it helps to progress the story. It's a very classic narrative beat. My slide is for the water bottle in Raft, which is just sort of a constant companion when you're floating out on the ocean by yourself. Such a nondescript, tiny item kind of helped me to tie my character to this sense of being stranded on a raft. So that's why I picked it. I also wrote about the Master Sword and how it travels its way through so many games across the Zelda franchise, and is always there, and it always reminds you that what journey you're on. And the other, to come in from a fourth or is it fifth angle, it's all of the flotsam and jetsam from the game Gone Home. So any of the diary entries, zines, tapes, game cartridges that help to build the world through the sort of set dressing. They're my favourite things.
So for me, honestly, the item that I wanted to talk the most about is from my own game, but other than that, definitely the ocarina from Ocarina of Time. It was, when I first played the game, it was like, I don't know, the first time I got this item that was like a really important tool that was not a weapon. I was like, what do I do with this? And I'd never heard of an ocarina before. I didn't know what it was. And then it's like, yeah, this really useful item that you do like amazing things with in the game, and it just felt very distinctive. But the item from my own game that I want to talk about, of course, was the diploma, and those who know.
We've had words about this diploma.
Yeah.
So I went a bit of a different slant. I don't know if anyone here has played Ultima 7, but it's an amazing game, and it's not an equipable item. The item that was most meaningful to me in a game was, I was playing this game, and every time you click on something, it tells you what it is. And I clicked on this like little object on the ground that looked kind of like a rock, and then I went to my mum and was like, "What's debris?" And she came over and looked at it and said, "Oh, that's debris, that's rubbish." And I think this is most meaningful to me because Ultima 7 really didn't dilute what it was, and it was a source of like a lot of information. And it's very accurate to kind of historical weapons and stuff like that, so I learnt a lot from this game.
So in a sense, it sounds like we're talking about things that ground the player in the reality, specifically being on the ground if you're debris, being on the ground if you're a diploma, or spoilers for unpacking. But things that open up the world and create possibilities for the player to either experience something with someone in the real world that expands the game, or just a key, which hints at the possibility of something that's going to come, but you don't know what it is yet. So moving on to one step larger, we're going to discuss background images or small details of games that also expand the world and give the player something to hold on to, even if it maybe was not as intended as it ended up being.
Yeah, so mine is an example from a very recent game, which you probably have heard of, Elden Ring, the Erd Tree. I think this is just an amazing game. Like, FromSoft is just really amazing at environmental storytelling and level design. So the way the Erd Tree leads you through the game is just a really impactful, compelling, like, you see these goals in the world, not just the Erd Tree, but like secondary things like a castle you might want to explore, and I feel that's really powerful as a mechanism within game design.
And then Goldie, we're gonna save your picture until you just. Oh no.
We're not gonna
Mine's a very similar answer, to be honest. It's
Yeah.
just from 2003. It's Cape Claw from Star Fox Adventures. Showing you my soul right now. It's the first time in a game that I remember turning a corner, and if you imagine that your game level is a ginormous cube with stuff inside it, it's the first time I remember looking down onto a level rather than looking up into a level. And for me it was such a visual and sort of spatial shift, and reflecting on it, it really marked sort of Act 2 or even Act 3, the big act of this game, which does have acts. It's a good game. It's a sort of a strange example, but when I was young and playing that game, it really was such a strong narrative beat to change the player's perspective, and it sort of taught me that visuals, visual storytelling is such an important tool for a game developer.
Mine, I don't know if anyone will recognize this. So if anyone here has ever played Creatures 2, that was a game that was just really important to me when I was about 9 or 10. And I remember there's like these creatures in the game called Norns and Grendels and Ettins, and they're like the main kind of creatures that you encounter. But there's a bit of backstory where they were all like created by this other species called the She, and they are gone. They're not in this game at all. but you see little hints of them here and there. And this statue of a she was like somewhere in the world of the game. And I remember encountering it for the first time and feeling this sort of like awe of like, oh, this is something that's like beyond this world, and there's like more to this world that I can't even that I can't actually encounter. It's not. It's like it keeps its secrets and just hints at certain things. I felt it was very powerful.
That's so important, having secrets that you want the player to uncover, and especially Elden Ring and creatures. It sounds like it's these past civilizations that have existed but have since fallen. I don't know about Star Fox Adventures. Is there a civilization that's fallen? Yes, no? In Star Fox Adventures?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, excellent. So we're all just
There we go.
we're all basically just doing game archaeology and uncovering the layers of what's underneath the representation that the player is actually getting to experience. That's so exciting. How did you work that into your games? I'm asking you a question off script. Let's go.
Oh, you know, like the ancient civilization and unpacking. And
Yeah, no, actually, I mean, in Ring of Pain, there is sort of, like the card backs especially, I tried to do something that's kind of inspired by, I think Dragon Age Inquisition was the one that did like tarot-ish like card illustration stuff. And so it's all kind of really vague and, yeah, we tied into sort of aesthetics of like, you know, ruins, like Incan ruins and those kind of like, something was built before, something that's kind of like this wise civilization that you don't really understand, and you're just uncovering it, you know, in this archaeological form, I suppose, or not. You're just playing the game, maybe.
I think with the Wayward Strand, it's set in 1978, rural Victoria, which is not a time that I was alive for. So, you know, the research that went into kind of painting an accurate picture of that, despite the fact that it's set on a flying hospital, it feels kind of like you're trying to represent a world that doesn't exist for you, and you kind of, I think, can pull some similar parallels when you're alluding to worlds that don't exist. Maybe.
And jokes aside, I mean, in Unpacking, you meet this character when she's 11, and you don't really know anything about her beyond her items. So really, like the entire game, we're representing a story just through the things you find. Like I found this she statue, but like you find a Rubik's cube, and you know, you learn about this character through these, and you only encounter her at moves. So every time stuff happens between the previous move and this move, and you're like trying to piece together what happened when I wasn't there.
What about you, Leanne? Your whole game is sort of like a futurist discovery.
Our game is 100 years after the apocalypse. There's a lot to uncover. Yeah, we're post-APOC. But it's really interesting to think about in terms of archaeology. When you're digging down, you're always uncovering things in a specific order. Usually it's your obviously most recent to least recent. But for example, in Wayward Strand, you have to get deeper with the characters in order to get deeper understanding of the ship, but then that also provides information about what's happening now. So I want to ask about examples of times when the order of presentation of a story element changed your understanding of the story. I'm going to give a first example, which is it's very fun. Love Nikki is a game about matching outfits that all have different attributes, and you're cool, or you're mature, whatever that means, or pure or elegant. But all of the sets have little pieces of narrative attached to the items in them. And then what happens is, if you have a suit that's going to cost, I'm not kidding, $140, the last piece of the story is on the last piece of the outfit, and it usually tells you what happened. So you're unlocking for free, you're playing, you get this thing, there's a romance, you don't know what's going to happen. Do you want to know how the story ends? You have to get the skirt. It's really, really interesting. It's an amazing way to do narrative. So do you guys have examples of that as well?
Not of slipping $150, $140
That's okay, me neither.
keys into the end of my games. Order of presentation. I think it's a fascinating device. I think you can really do a lot with it. We see it in movies and we see it in TV all the time. The two like blockbuster examples that I think of are obviously like BioShock. At the end of BioShock, like, ooh, what a surprise. And Borderlands 2 as well, Handsome Jack. Spoilers, sorry, the game's like 12 years old. Handsome Jack's daughter is a character called Angel who's been helping you the whole time. Turns out that he's got her in a situation, and I don't know, the big reveal at the end of that. The other one that's more indie and blew my socks off was Her Story, and Any Games by that crew, where the digging and the archaeology is up to the player, so following your nose. So you could really have any order of event. Like, the story could be told to you in any order, and that, I think, is exciting. Wayward Strand as well is very into this, where it's up to the player to choose where to be at any given time, and depending on where they are and who they're talking to, they'll be missing other conversations that are happening at that exact same time on the ship. So we couldn't control the order of the storytelling, really. We did it with a few big arcs that happened between the days on board the ship. But it was really, it's up to the player to find their own way to tell the story that they get at the end. Yeah.
For me, when we first were thinking about these questions, the first thing that came to mind was a game called Analog: A Hate Story. It's a visual novel. I think it's still one of my favorites. And at the very start of the game, you meet this character who is an AI, and she asks you what your name is, and you try to enter it, and she's like, "Oh, it's coming out garbled. Let's instead try this other way." And she lets you answer like yes and no to things, and it's a conceit to keep it a really simple interface with simple canned responses. But it's integrated really well into the story because, so she says to you, "I'm terribly sorry, it must be difficult being unable to say anything." And it seems like this, she's like being nice and feels bad that you can't talk to her properly. But massive spoilers for later in this game, but again, it's an old game now. You find out later that she was originally not an AI, she was a real person, and she had her ability to speak, like, taken away from her, like physically she was mutilated to be unable to speak. And then replaying the game, I encountered this line again that I'd forgotten about, and I was like, oh my god. Oh no. So that was mine.
I just slip in quickly, Simon. I think it's so common for when you do flip a script on its head for the replay to be where that really shines.
Yeah, it's kind of like writing a mystery novel where you want people to read it and get to who the killer is, and then they reread it and say, okay, how did I miss everything?
Precisely, yeah.
That's my favorite kind of storytelling, is giving the player a small detail that they don't know yet is going to be very important to them. But in terms of the things that can be important to the player, I also want to ask about how you determine what the player is allowed to keep. Because inventory management is a system by itself, but sometimes, especially in unpacking and in Ring of Pain as well, maybe if you have the Hermit's Tiara, you don't want to keep a whole bunch of stuff, or maybe you do, and you have to swap your build out halfway through, or that diploma. We're going to talk about the diploma, Wren.
All right, yeah, we're going to talk about the diploma. We'll talk about all kinds of things. Yeah, unpacking is all about what you get to keep and what you leave behind. And we actually don't let you decide that at all. We made that conscious decision that the player only has control over these specific snapshots in time. You get the items from us. You don't get to choose them. You get to figure out what they mean to you and what you think they mean to the character. And you decide how to organize this place. But you can't throw items away. You can't decide, I'm keeping this or I'm not keeping this. And it's determined by the character according to her life, but it's like representative of real world decision making. Like one example was when we were looking at the character's DVDs and trying to decide what stays and what goes. At one point, I noticed that our narrative designer had like removed some of the earliest DVDs from the player's kind of inventory, I guess, but collection, yeah, there we go, from the player's collection, and added a couple new ones. And I was like, wait, but that's not how it works in real life. Like, you don't just go, well, these are the oldest, so I'm getting rid of them and replacing them with new ones. No, you go, well, I really love this one. This one I don't really care that much about, so maybe I'll just get rid of that. I think in the end, we barely got rid of any DVDs or books because it just worked better to have more. But
True to life.
yeah, true to life too. Yeah. My favorite is when players are like, why does this person have so many books? And then they like look at their own house and they're like, oh.
It's a Mary Kondo.
Yeah. So, and also another thing is that our character picks up items and even habits from the characters that she lives with. So when she lives with her housemates, she after she moves out, she actually inherits some of the kitchen items that one of the housemates had, like a toaster and a rice cooker, because it's like that's how it goes, right? Like you live with people and then someone moves out and they're like, I don't need this anymore. Do you want it? I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then she also like picks up interests and habits. So like she has a housemate who's into bugs and entomology, and in the next move she has a pet beetle that like maybe she got from this housemate. And when she lived with the boyfriend, like before she just hearing this heavy sigh here at the front.
The most hated character that doesn't exist actually in the game is the level where you cannot put your stuff away properly.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, but like before she lives with him, she has instant coffee, which we've seen in early demos that some people try to throw in the bin. But then after she lives with the boyfriend, who's a bit of a coffee fanatic, she gets like a
French press or something.
yeah, like a French press and like a bean
grinder.
Yeah, bean grinder. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, you can tell that I'm the instant coffee drinker.
First panel.
So sorry. I feel like I've sinned here in Melbourne. But yeah. So like she picks up this habit from him, and we try to kind of keep that all throughout the game. Is like every time she interacts with a person, that leaves some sort of imprint behind.
It's a really beautiful touch.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so Ring of Pain, like half of this, well, a big portion of the strategy is basically inventory management. So we tie mechanically, as Leanne mentioned, to that with scaling items. Like some might be affected by limits within your equipables, or like scale based on the number of empty slots you've got. But probably the more interesting answer to this question is I like exploring the idea of like where you stand with your ethics in the game, especially being like a dark roguelike. It's typically you just go everywhere, you kill everything, you know, you get the most points and whatever. But we included things like a room full of just cute dogs and frogs, and it was quite interesting to see. And we also reward souls for killing them, so there is like a benefit for killing them, but you know, they're cute harmless dogs and frogs. And it was kind of funny to see streamers play it and go into this room, and they might like turn their screen black, they'll go to a different window and then like slay all the dogs, and you can see the chat saying we can hear them dying and then turn it back on, that kind of thing. And then you've also got like just basically a graveyard in this game, and when you pillage a grave you get either like random between poisoned, cursed, or some souls. And so and there's no like UI really indicating this, and we have had people like complain that, oh, you know, I pillaged this grave and I died from poison. I'm like, why are you grave robbing? Like, you just shouldn't be. You know, this isn't a good thing to do in real life. So yeah, it's interesting to try and play with those ideas within a game context, especially one that's different from what players expect.
For sure. There's 3 collectibles in Olive Wood Strand. One of them, you are asked to clean out a patient's room. Patient's not there anymore. And you're putting stuff into a box, and then for one of the items, you're prompted as to whether you'd like to put it in your bag. And I've watched streamers playing this, and 99% of them say, no, I'm not taking that. But there's a significant story beat that can happen if you do take it. But yeah, we're not a real collectible kind of game. I guess with Wayward Strand, as I mentioned before, you've got sort of 7 or 8 scenes playing at once to choose from at any given time. So players are really collecting those.
Yeah, as you
Yeah.
go through, the journal gets filled out. If you haven't played it yet, it's a really beautiful game about getting to know people and getting to know what you can't know about people. And so you collect those stories, you can flip through them and try to tie the details together.
Figure out why somebody's really angry in the afternoon, or really happy in the afternoon, and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is interesting because I know it's storytelling beyond words, but I'm going to talk about words for a second. When you're writing a branching dialogue, if you want to have a place where the player can ask questions but can also continue, it's very common practice to have a line that you can click on, you get some information, that line disappears, and then only the ones that are going to continue the conversation stay. So you're funneling the player in a way you're telling them you can't keep this piece of information. It might go in your journal if it's relevant to a story or a quest or something like that, but it's a similar kind of attrition to trying to play with the misting vessel and going, I really want this spell, but I'm going to lose my stealth chance. But in conversation terms.
Just for context, the misting vessel is an item that gives you a guaranteed stealth, like 100% stealth, but every extra item you equip, it reduces that. So it's like encouraging
That's
you to,
cool.
It's really fun.
to
It's my favorite.
or to balance against that.
But that's a way of inviting the player into telling the story with you that I found really interesting in all of these games, and that's why I wanted to put this panel together, because it's about what do you pick up, what do you leave behind in Unpacking and Ring of Pain, and then in Wayward Strand, it's what can you collect in terms of information and understanding and empathy. So what are your favorite ways to invite people into co-telling the story with you, Golden?
I think it's a pretty common one, but one which works really beautifully is to have multiple ways to say the same thing. So in one of our scenes, Esther is a patient who is certain that they haven't had their medicine in the morning, and they tell you, you're this 14-year-old kid. And Casey's not going to give Esther medicine, but, isn't comfortable with the idea of saying yes. So we gave her the options to either say, I don't think I should, or, I straight up I can't, or I'll go and talk to the nurses about that for more information. And I think that again, watching people play it now, I can see that they're deliberating over moments like that when the outcome's the same. Just giving the player, those opportunities to inject themselves into choices. It's, as I said, it's a really common example, but it works like a charm.
Yeah, in Unpacking, from very early on, we had discussions about the tension between the player and the player character, because it's a game that is both about like discovery of who this character is through her items, but also self-expression for the player of like, I want to decorate this apartment according to how I like to decorate apartments in real life. And this was actually a point of contention even when like talking to potential investors where and publishers where they were like, I'm not sure about this tension. Like, well, won't the character being a specific person with their own kind of personality and the items belong to them, won't that come into conflict with the player being able to express themselves? And we were like, yeah, that is one of our concerns actually. Like, this is something that we don't know how exactly we'll pull off. But in the end, it actually worked beautifully. It actually was in harmony. So you had the character owned these items, but players would then project additional things onto these items according to their own lives. So like I remember watching a stream of someone just unpacking things in the kids' room, and then he unpacks the Game Boy and starts talking about how back in his day, Game Boys didn't have backlights, and like we used to like play them, in bed with a little flashlight, and then he finds the flashlight and he's like really happy. So it's like players essentially fuse themselves into the character and inject themselves into her. And so you end up with this character that's more meaningful because it's both the character we wrote, but also the player. Oh, and also one other thing I was going to mention was one place where players surprised us with how they told the story with us was we made a replay system for the game that Tim worked very hard on.
Oh yeah.
So basically, you can watch the playthrough that you just did, but like sped up. And you can see all the little choices that you made, and it just like high speed unpacks everything. And we've seen players use it to create animations, because it shows every time you move an item, not just when it comes out of a box and goes to a spot. So players have been like moving around items to animate them, and the first one was like someone made a little soccer game with all the plush toys. I think like the little troll doll was a referee, and they're playing with the soccer ball, and it's just amazing. So that was the biggest surprise for us, I think.
It's really cute. Go and look it up. It's on Twitter. I tried to include it, but it didn't want to play nicely with the presentation.
No.
But it's really interesting that we're talking about basically we're constraining the player by only letting them make decisions within the confines of what we want them to be able to do. We can call those affordances. It's important to remember that you decide what the player can do, and that means that you can decide, I don't want you to do something.
Yes.
That makes things quite interesting. And if you start thinking about a cohesive world, if you start thinking about the world that we live in, so much of what we do is defined by what we can't do. So what would be your number one tip for maintaining a cohesive world, Wren, and how did you discover it?
Spreadsheets. Lots and lots of spreadsheets. We also kind of cheated on this one because we cheated on having to research our game, unlike Goldie's team, who was researching a specific time period and needing to show that time period accurately, as accurately as you can in a flying hospital. But no, we based it on like about the time period that we grew up in. The character is like between my age and Tim's age, I think a little closer to my age. And so it's just our lived experience, and she lives in Brisbane. Like everything in the game is different suburbs of Brisbane. So it's it's if you base things on your own experiences, obviously you shouldn't only do that. Like we did ask other people and like do some research for some side characters, but like grounding things in your experience is a nice shortcut for making something that feels real.
Absolutely.
and saves you some work.
Yeah, that's a really big one. It's like the genre of like, I think the Italians call it neo-realism, like, which is, he made me do that, sorry. The idea of realism based on what is real, not in video games. I think Robert Yang wrote about this, how we chase realism in video games to mean that it looks real, but I think in writing, what realism means is that it reflects what our lives are like.
It feels real.
It feels real, and it's from real experiences, and that's a huge part of why diversity in games is really important, because it means that more experiences are being covered by our writers. In Wayward Strand, again, setting it in 1978 in a particular place, even though we did bend some of the history, it meant for our team that we were going down to Inverloch and speaking to the little old ladies at the Historical Society, which they adored, which we adored.
We did the same for Broken Roads. We went to Western Australia recently, and people are so happy to talk to you about history.
Tell you about the town.
It's lovely.
And it was very giving as well, that gave us tons of tiny little details that we could put into the world, and in the end we ended up with a very robust piece because it was lifted by those little real world details. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say for cohesion, just like a big thing is understanding how seriously your world takes itself and the boundaries of your interactions with the player, and being consistent with how you implement those rules. From a visual standpoint or even narrative standpoint, it could be like, does it reference memes? Does it break the fourth wall? I remember when I was working on Armello, one of the first card designs that I was tasked to illustrate was Cat Burglar. And I wanted to make it ceiling cat, like peeking through a roof, basically. And Ty was like, nah. Ty's the art director, was like, no, we're not doing that kind of thing. And that kind of really reinforced like the idea of being true to what your game is. And with Ring of Pain, so early on, only the owl was written in these rhyming couplet format. And I needed to decide whether different NPCs should have a different dialogue style. And when we decided that all NPCs would have the same kind of rhyming dialogue style, it was like, well, should the player have that as well? And so to keep the player more of a vessel, I made it really neutral, really basic, kind of broad, generic questions. And but this decision to make the whole dialogue rhyming couplets also had an interesting side effect with marketing, because then fans interacting with us, like I continue this through to the Twitter account and like talk in rhyme quite a lot, actually.
It's very impressive. Every time I tweet at your account, I get a really neat reply. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's the owl.
Yeah, so I 100%ed Simon's game the other month, and I tweeted about it, and then Simon responded in the rhyming couplets, and I was very touched.
It wasn't me, it was the owl. No.
Oh yeah, sorry, the owl.
But yeah, it's really cool. I even get emails like written like that, and yeah, it gives the players an interesting way to like engage with the fiction that's not just fan art, which I found, because we get more like rhyming couplet poem art, like creative writing than fan art for sure.
Cool.
And yeah, another example of like how that consistency is built through the world is the interactions with the frog. So we have like an Easter egg where you need some dialogue from the frog, and I wasn't sure whether to make the frog talk. And so I ended up writing it just as like it gestures towards things, but the gesturing is in rhyme. So it kind of still fits the format, but yeah, it's a bit different. Just a nice Easter egg.
I just wanted to add about referencing memes and stuff. In Unpacking, we've got a wooden mannequin that can dab, and that's one of the achievements.
That's right.
And it takes place in what was like 2004. So I think our main character invented dabbing.
I think, that's definitely accurate. Is that your secret about your favorite character you've created, Wren?
No, actually. That's the next question, isn't it?
It is the next question, but...
Well, no, that is not the secret. The secret is something else.
Will we save it for the end? It's a very good secret.
You're the finale.
Oh, okay, am I?
Yeah, you are the finale.
True, okay.
So yeah, constraints and secrets are two good ways to build a very consistent world, and I really love, again, that all these games have things that you can discover visually and narratively that are tucked away and there for players who want to find them. And I think that's really important, to have those details for people who want them, but not to force them on players, because some people don't care, and that is also fine. Tetris is great. It doesn't need a story. It does have a story, but that's something else. You can just have secrets and lore for people who want it, and compelling gameplay for people who want to smack things in the face like frogs and dogs.
Ideally not.
Such as.
But it is nice to have little secrets. And Simon, why don't you tell us about your favorite secret?
Yeah, so I'm not going to talk about actual spoiler secrets in our game, because there's quite a few, and you should work for them. But I'll tell you about the inception of the frog. So the frog is probably my favorite character in the game. Owl's definitely great, but in maybe like 2012 or so, I went to a concept art workshop, and we had this just like quickly sketch some character task, and I did this horrendous but charming weird frog thing, and I was like really proud of it, and I made it my profile picture on Facebook for a while, identified with this thing, and I'm like, I gotta get this in a game sometime. And so yeah, eventually this is kind of the origin story of the frog, I guess. It started as a concept from a concept art class, but actually a lot of the placeholder art for Ring of Pain looked like this. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, so I'd filled the game with this, and also like bits and pieces of completed artwork. And then when people were testing it, as soon as the card would flip around and show like something like this, they always laugh. And so I decided to post this on Twitter when I was like early in development. And everyone really seemed to resonate with this weird yellow one down the bottom. And so I was like, oh, there's something to this character. Let's just make it the main character of the game. Yes, that's where Al came from. This like combination of cute and terrifying.
Perfect. I love it. My secret is that, well, I have many secrets, but this is one that I'm allowed to tell people. Back in 2012, slight content warning, I worked on a game to help prevent sexual abuse in children called Orbit Rescue. That was then picked up by the Daniel Malcolm Foundation. And in the game, children are encouraged to have 5 trusted adults, so at different places, so not just like both your parents, but a teacher, someone outside of school, someone at home, so that there's always someone they can go and talk to. And when we were casting the voices for those, I thought, you know, my husband's pretty great. He's a nice guy. He would take care of children. So my husband, who's sitting here in the front row, is a trusted adult in that game who has helped Australian children hopefully avoid something very terrible.
In Wayward Strand, it's, as you know by now, it's impossible to see all the scenes on a playthrough. There's this one scene on the 3rd day featuring a character named Joe. That's not Joe.
No, that's the Orbit, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't bring it up. I'll give you a picture of it. A nurse called Joe who's very surly, and on the 3rd day he writes a letter, and I've just released this game. I've been watching almost all of the Twitch streams of it, and I haven't seen anybody find this scene yet. But while he's writing the letter, sitting at a table in the nurse's break room, by the way, he speaks as he writes the letter, and then every now and then he stops saying, and then he'll keep going, and it's what is not said.
It's really effective. I found that actually.
You did find it.
I
Nice,
did.
good. Yeah,
Fantastic.
it's a really beautiful letter, and in his silence he reveals a huge part of his character that I just adore. I was so pleased when I first saw it. So that's my favourite part. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, so in unpacking, we hit a secret mode in the game. We finally revealed it for April Fools, and people thought we were joking, but it was always in there, and it's real. It's called Dark Star mode, and so normally you finish playing a level.
There you go.
No, too early.
Ah, too early.
No, that's okay. Let's leave it on. Yeah. So usually when you finish a level, you get a star, a gold star, and that's when you've put everything away properly. But if instead you put everything in the wrong place from the very first level, if you put everything in the wrong place, you get a dark star, and it makes a spooky noise, and you click it. And you get a line from the character where she's kind of a little shit. So, I think the first one is looks good to me, time to go play. And then in this level, yeah, it's they knew me at uni, they knew what to expect. She moves in with housemates. I think my favorite thing about this is when you finish the game, you get a song, and you get the final credits image, and I don't want to spoil it entirely, but it's our character with someone else sitting outside on in the yard, and it's a very kind of serene, kind of touching moment. And in this version, you go back to the photo album the first time after finishing, and you see the picture, and it says something like, "Thank you for coming on this journey with me." But if you play in Dark Star mode, you go there, and it's got this picture of them outside, and she goes, "I'm not going back in there, place is trashed."
Good job, Sam.
I encourage everyone to play Dark Star mode. It's surprisingly challenging.
Yeah.
Yes, I brought my Switch for that reason. I'm going to go back to my hotel and play Dark Star mode. So that's it for our questions that we planned. It is time for Q&A. If people want to come up to the microphone, or if you need someone to bring the microphone to you, put your hand up. We'll get to you. I believe we have about 10 minutes. 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Oops.
Wow.
2 minutes.
One question.
2 minutes of questions.
Hello. So we talked a little bit about ancient civilizations and archaeology, and obviously about how games themselves are little bits of archaeology. You mentioned Gone Home, where you're finding the detritus to life. Talking about debris that you're finding, hinting at lost worlds. How do you reconcile between people that are, really focused on looking for story through narrative, and how do you cue them off to those little secrets that are immensely important? But then also, how do you let go of the fact that most players are never going to see them?
Visual storytelling is a big one for me. It's just obviously some tips and tricks of a visual artist is to use a flash of red in an otherwise blue world. That always works. And for me as well, personally, my journey with narrative design is that, especially for Wayward Strand, I don't care.
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
actually designed for them to not see almost all of it, so that's fine.
You have to be kind of complete within yourself. You have to be happy with the world that you've created and what exists, and also open to the interpretations of other people coming in and deciding different things about what you have created. And yeah, working really closely with your level artists and level designers to make sure that those things are accessible but not visible, or that kind of thing. And also skill design is another way to hide things.
Yeah, I feel like I could give an entire talk on the subject, so I'll just give a tiny thing, which is in unpacking, we kind of have this great advantage over a lot of games that do. Sorry, I'm failing to. Words are hard. What's it called?
Start sentence go.
Environmental storytelling. There we go. That's the word. The thing that my game does. So we have this advantage over a lot of other games that do environmental storytelling in that we force the player to hold each and every item that they are about to decide where to put, and they have to think about it. And so it's not like it's just there in the background. They don't have a choice but to consider it. That's all I'll add.
Yeah, I don't have a useful answer.
Okay. So we do actually have another panel coming up at PAX on Friday, not to cross-promote or whatever, it's fine. But that one is on making and breaking connections, the art of betrayal, which is more character-focused, but also still world-building. So I hope we'll see some of you there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you
to
very
our
much.
presentation.
Thank you.